like to welcome our audience to this Lunch and Learn webinar from the Supply Chain Sustainability School. I'm delighted to have with me a guest speaker who's going to talk to us about some of the problems on the typical construction site and some of the tools and innovation that can perhaps help deliver better projects. But before we get started, I need to do the inevitable share of my screen. So Aviv, could you just wave to me to confirm that you can see a slide deck? Thank you very much. Welcome to the audience again. So this afternoon's Lunch and Learn session is entitled Reducing Waste in Construction in a World with Accurate Progress Tracking. And as I said earlier, I've been delighted to be joined by Aviv Libovici from BuildDots. And I think some of the problems we're going to talk about today are the general lack of good quality information on construction sites that can help us plan and manage our sites much better. And some of the tools that are now emerging that are going to vastly help project managers and site managers, and in fact, anybody involved with delivering a construction project. We as an industry are capable of the most incredible achievements when we think about the complexity and the size of the projects we're called on to deliver. We are extremely good at doing very difficult work in a hostile environment. But at the same time, as an industry, we are perhaps rather behind other sectors in terms of our use of technology, in terms of improving our productivity, and in terms of our digital investment. And that's some of the topics we're going to talk about today. So very quickly to introduce myself, I'm Dave Emery from the Supply Chain Sustainability School. I thought of a very brief, alliterative way to describe what I do, and that is that I help create, curate, and communicate some of our learning materials, and my particular interest and specialities are around off-site construction and, as today, digital construction. I said I'm delighted to have Aviv Libovici, and I'm sorry I stumbled over your name twice, Aviv. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Thanks, Dave. Don't worry about it. It's a common hardship for people who join webinars with me. So I'm Aviv. I am the CPO, that's Chief Product Officer, and one of the 3 co-founders of BuildDots, which I will tell you a bit about. I think part of what I do now, and how this is my time with the industry has evolved, is take part in a lot of discussions like this. I'm going to call it a discussion because hopefully we'll get to that part, and I think that's the interesting part. But basically, just having these sort of call it brainstorming sessions, discussions, open, thinking together about challenges that this industry faces. And while I will tell you about BuildDots and about how BuildDots connects to those challenges, I do truly believe that it's not about BuildDots. It's about how everything comes together. BuildDots is just, let's call it a piece in that puzzle.
Excellent. Thank you, Aviv. So for our audience this afternoon, I'm going to quickly canter through a couple of bits of information about the school and about the digital product that has led to Aviv and myself working together. In the meantime, as we go through this session, you will see at the bottom of your Zoom window, there is a Q&A box. I do encourage you to type questions and comments for Aviv in that box as we go along and towards the end of the session. Or if they look very urgent during the session, we'll ask Aviv to address those issues. If I can just very, very quickly, for those who may not be familiar with the school, just give you a very brief overview. And it is going to be brief. Our mission is to be a world-class collaboration to enable a more sustainable built environment. And we hope to do that by educating people and encouraging collaboration and innovation to drive out waste. So what we tend to do is have and supply tools that can assess an individual's knowledge in any area of construction, and then focus some learning materials towards those gaps in their knowledge. And everybody who engages with the school, their learning is transparent to their supply chain and to their potential customers, which is a really virtuous circle, I think. And you can see from the numbers of companies and individual learners, our reach has extended beyond our wildest hopes when the school was started 10 years ago. But we have to recognize in an industry of 3 million employees, we haven't quite reached everyone yet. So our work is funded and led by now 179 partners, which includes the top 20 construction companies, top 10 house building companies, people like Highways England, Transport for London, etc., etc. And the school has a wide range of key topic areas. Today, we're talking about our digital offering. And our mission in terms of digital is to accelerate the adoption of digital technology in the whole supply chain across the industry. So that's broadly what the school does. Much of the work we've done in the last 2 years to bolster our digital content derives from a CITB funded project called not developing as it says, but downloading a digital mindset. I should, if you'll forgive a moment of immodesty, point out that this is now a prize-winning, award-winning initiative. We hope by the end of this week it will be a multi-award-winning initiative. But in essence, what we did was work on Tideway East project with Costain, Vinci Grand Projet, and Bechy Solentage. And we looked at some of the innovations that were attempted and indeed implemented on that very real world project, some of which were very successful, others somewhat less so. But it gave us a great body of case studies and knowledge from what actually happens when you try and invoke digital change in the construction industry. And the outputs from the project were a vast increase in our resource library, a training needs assessment tool where we can laser focus learning material to a student's gaps in their knowledge, a maturity assessment which will establish where your firm is relative to others in terms of your digital maturity. We also developed some new e-learning modules, a number of what we call digital bite-sized videos. So these were videos where we've interviewed people who have created or implemented some form of digital innovation and what the results have been. And finally, we created a digital leadership course. This is above and beyond what the school normally offers, and it's something I'll talk about towards the end of the session, if I may. So digital is really important. The CITB, Construction Industry Training Board, believes that digital tech will be the foundation of our modernization of our industry, and they see digital as a cornerstone of being more efficient and providing a better quality product. And finally, and perhaps very importantly, I think, is they see digital as having the ability to retain people in the industry, but also perhaps more importantly, to attract new young talent for whom the construction industry, let's be honest, isn't necessarily the first choice of many young people. So that's just a brief setting of the scene. I'm delighted to welcome Aviv from BuildDots. BuildDots has recently become a partner of the school. And when I've heard about the company and spoken to Aviv and his colleagues, I'm really excited that we have somebody here who I believe is really innovative, understands the industry and its problems, and has got some really great ideas about how they can begin to help make our industry more effectively. So I'm going to stop sharing. Aviv, if you'd like to share your screen, the floor is yours, and I will monitor the Q&A in the meantime.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Dave, and thank you for the warm intro. So again, hi everyone. I am Aviv. I will talk today about what BuildDots is, to give some context to things that I will then mention, and to me and where I come from in this industry. Then sort of discuss the point of, call it progress tracking, call it data, call it what you will, and how does that come into play with managing or reducing waste. And finally, give a few examples, because without examples, it's all just fluff, as I like to say. So before I actually go into BuildDots, I'll say a few words about how it came to be. And I think there was a part there, David, in what you mentioned that really resonates with me, which is the industry achieves great things. That is pre-BuildDots, without BuildDots, is just what the industry does. I think the ability to deliver projects and the way they are delivered today is, with the tools that exist, is amazing, And when we came in, considering, that is myself and my two co-founders, considering to do something in construction, and became aware of just what is expected of let's call it a management team on site on a construction project, for them to deliver a project that seemed unreal. And I think what I always say is, those who choose to put themselves in that situation and to tackle all those challenges are probably so motivated, are so excited, passionate about the ability to actually create something that is, well, there's no creation bigger, that they succeed. But it is very challenging. And that is where we came in. So what is it that we are about? Basically, we call it more control, less effort. I think it starts from the fact that to be able to deliver projects, you need to have control. You need to know what is going on, to be able to make decisions, to be able to prioritize resources, to be able to just report things upwards, everything. And the industry understands that. And because it understands that, we do, in fact, put a lot of effort into that. Just on one of your slides, David, I captured quickly the existence of lean construction there. Lean construction is a mechanism that the industry built to say, okay, here's how we have a bit more control of what's going on and a bit more clarity in how to plan forward in a way that can actually happen. So it's one method, which, by the way, I'm a big advocate of, that is used for this. And we are talking about people who are sent on site to provide that control. We're talking about spending hours of site managers, of trades, of planners, etc., in an attempt to gain as much control and as much visibility to what's going on that is happening. That is costly to do. And just to give you a sense, obviously we work with companies all over the world, and I think there is nowhere that achieves control like projects in the UK do. I think that the most evolved understanding of construction management exists here. But still, the result is not fantastic, is not perfect. Is this quote, "We know we don't know," is one that I heard from a project manager here in the UK at one point, and I liked it. Basically saying, I know I don't know. We know we don't know. I know I don't know everything. I know there are things that probably escape me. Why? Because there are too many details and someone missed something, or because maybe individuals have all the information, but to gather it all and aggregate it in a way that makes sense to people higher up is difficult. So maybe there's a particular site manager or a foreman of a trade that knows that there's something missing in some apartment somewhere in this project, but it doesn't mean that everyone knows. And for that reason, all sorts of workflows have been built to accommodate that. If you think about it, just the effect of valuating work and then paying for 95% of that work is an effect of an industry that says, yes, but maybe something in what we just agreed on is not really as we think it is. So we have to have something held back here to handle that. And Bill Lutz came in to say, well, this is unreal in many ways. To expect people to manage projects in these circumstances is unreal. I am shocked that there are buildings, and I think it's just due to the fact that people work so hard and are so motivated. But we are about sort of changing that equation, coming in and saying, let's give you back control, let's give you visibility, and let's reduce the time that people spend on trying to get it manually. Quickly, how does that work? We take a design model or a construction model, but a model. We then take the program. We have a system in place that with assistance of experts in our team builds a connection between the two, and then understands what we call a detailed execution plan. That is what is meant to happen at each phase in each location, when I say what is meant to happen, what work needs to be done on which elements. So we are talking about this window behind me to know that that needs to be framed at some point and then glazed, and that the wall will be first fixed at first in some activity in the schedule, and then closed up, and then tape and jointed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and such for each and every element. The system then tracks all of those through video capture. Somebody walks the site with a 360-degree camera mounted on their hard hats, just a simple GoPro camera. You walk around, you might be doing something else as you do that, but you're there with the camera on your head. And what the technology will do is we'll analyze that video against that plan that I mentioned to understand what is done, what is not done, and how does that connect to the schedule and other things, which is then information that is presented on a dashboard system. You're seeing one such snapshot of that there. Let's bring it down to specific use cases or benefits. One, call it progress tracking, call it operational management, more the day-to-day on site. So we are talking about two things. A, take these individuals, take site managers for the most part, and say, no longer do you need to be spending time on filling in Excel sheets, reporting progress to the planner, to the QSs, to your project director, to your client, to anyone. You don't need to do that because the system does that. Obviously, you still need to know what's going on, but that will happen regardless. Just that fact means that suddenly there are effectively more managers or more management power on site, and that is huge. Then we're talking about the information itself. So for that, I'll quote another person. This time is from a project of ours in Finland, actually, where the site engineer said, I can now prove what I know. What does that mean? It means that as you sit down for a weekly trade meeting, you understand exactly what happened last week. And not only do you understand exactly what happened, not did something complete yes or no, but actually how much work was done. You can see that here, just showing how much of the work was done in a particular time frame. But also, you can show that. So it's not about now that nobody has the truth. And then one person thinks one thing, another person thinks another. And in that situation, can we really agree on a way forward? No. And I think when you speak to people who are more evolved in the way they think about the industry, then they recognize that contractors, or let's call it main contractors, are not trying to exploit subcontractors. And subcontractors are not trying to lie to main contractors. It's just that when truth isn't out there, when information doesn't exist, then we will all protect our interests because we're business people and that's what we should be doing. And then how can you really agree a way forward, really agree what has or has not happened and who needs to improve in such an environment? It is very, very difficult. What we've seen specifically on that project as an example is that they ran a study and then saw that while before the introduction of build-outs in that project and similar such projects in their company, 52% of activities finished within their planned duration. I'm not saying the date because maybe they started late for other reasons, but within their planned duration. So an activity on a floor, first fixed partitions on a floor, finished 52% of them finished within that time frame. And just after having that there, without really having the system making any decisions, of course, because it doesn't, it will never, just having the information available there in that weekly meeting made that number change to 76. Why? Because suddenly we're all aligned and suddenly everyone can see who it is that needs to do better. And when someone needs to do better, when a subcontractor needs to be doing more work, means that they have that work available. And if they know that they have that work available, they will bring in the resource, because what more do you want than to bring resource to a place where you know they will be productive? Next is financials. So part of the strength in tracking progress against a model, against BIM, is the fact that we understand the core progress of what I call construction elements. Once you do that, you can display that information here against an activity sequence, as is in this view, or against just items from the contract or contracts. And then we're seeing a different view of this information, just showing which work was done and which was not during this particular month, meaning what work is completed and can be paid for in good conscience, let's say. This is, again, a lot of this is about relationships, because when you have that, then now main contractor and subcontractor QS can sit down and understand what's going on and make a decision. That decision, by the way, could be to pay for more things than are shown in this screen. That is because there are also materials on site that BuildUs doesn't track. That is just because, you know what, you were okay and managed to solve a variation for me, and I will help you with cash flow, because we're an industry of people, and that's how it works. And it's not about just taking the data as is and making it holy. It's about using it to improve processes. And finally, there's a lot of truth here. There's truth in what happened that month, but there's truth in what happened when a variation came in, how much of the work was already done, etc., which can facilitate a lot of cases, commercial cases on sites. Quickly about scheduling, it's very similar, but basically, in terms of the feature here, just to give context, what this system does, and others do as well, by the way, is feed progress data directly into the schedule. So you click a button, and the progress data that BuildUs shows suddenly drop lines the schedule here. You can see some information here in the actual % complete in this file. That is done with P6, with Power Project, with Microsoft Project even. This, I think, means two things. It means that suddenly this person that's called planner can spend all their time planning and not reporting, not using their time to feed numbers into a file to share it with someone. And if you don't do that and you have that extra time, then you can use that to do a better job planning, to look forward in a different way. By the way, to consider other bits of information that BuildUs gives you, like the fact that something is not 100% complete. It is 93%, as it is shown here. And that 7% is something that needs to be accounted for, will be done at some point. Maybe it's an element that we didn't complete for good reason, because of logistical purposes or because of materials or whatever it is. But we need to be aware and look at what happened and base the plan forward on that to bring the plan to a more realistic, let's call it, state. There are, everything I talked about is progress tracking. Our topic today is about progress tracking, but there is a level of quality assurance in this. So what we're seeing here is that this is how the duct run should be built based on the model. And you can see how it is here in reality. And what it's showing me is that there should be a piece of duct here, but it's recognizing that it's there, so calling that an error. That is a deviation from the design. That could be fine, and that could be a problem. And it's up to someone on site to look at this and say, do I need to stop this now before it causes more rework moving forward? But typically, issues are discovered when the problem starts. Issues are discovered when the next thing that can't work anymore because of this issue is we try to build it. This is about saying, no, let's do that now and not get there after possibly we also, I don't know, closed this ceiling up or did whatever we did, and we'd have to take that apart as well. And finally, but very importantly, what I call management visibility. You look at managers, directors in this industry and in any other. You look at myself in my company. What do people want? People want to be able to use their knowledge, their experience of their business, their experience of their industry, everything, to the best possible way to support their teams. But to do that, you have to know what's going on. And part of the problem is that in this manual reporting chain, information is digested at every level. And eventually, people higher up receive something that is pre-analyzed by the experience and knowledge of others who don't have the same experience and knowledge that they do. And that means that project directors, that means that construction leads, that means that regional directors can't be effective enough. And when you start saying, let's break all these barriers and just give everyone a clear view of exactly what's going on, then suddenly decisions can be made in a different world, and a lot of support can be provided. And I say support because I believe in support, because I believe that what a project director wants to do is to see what's going on and be able to support just one of his site managers in one of the blocks saying, hey, look, you're not noticing that this is starting to happen. It will become a big problem soon. Let's handle that now. And that is what management support looks like. Okay, with all that said, let's talk about how does this relate to waste. And I will say that when we first started BuildDots, two ideas kept coming up from the industry that honestly I did not understand. These were about health and safety and sustainability. And I kept saying to myself, of course, well, this is a tool that tracks progress. How can I affect health and safety? How can I affect sustainability? I don't understand. I don't know. And it takes a while to understand that control of what's happening on site can have an effect on a lot of different things. And basically around such control, you can build processes that help mitigate all sorts of problems. These are just some of them. So when I talk about waste, I am talking about three types of waste. Time. Time as in productivity. People who are not productive in what they do, whether they are managers, whether they are workers, because of constraints, we'll talk about that in a second. Next is, of course, materials. The most obvious example is that if you build something and then have to redo it, there's waste there. And finally, of course, cost. And these two wastes also create cost, but there's a lot of waste of funds, let's call it. Some of it is called expected, as in we do certain things in a way that is not completely efficient, therefore it costs more. And some are unexpected. We built a wall wrong, we have to redo it. That's extra cost. If we dive into these now, and we start with this idea of time, then you look at time from two perspectives. One, people's time. People's time, there are a lot of examples of that, but talk about workers that come into site and then have nowhere to work because the subcontractor was told that they should be bringing in their dry liners on Monday. And they come in on Monday and suddenly there's nowhere ready for them. That is a common problem that we all know, but the effect of that, never mind who pays for it eventually, there was waste happened here. Somebody will take the financial fall, but the waste happened regardless. Rework, of course, here I'm talking about rework from the perspective of time, meaning the fact that you have to build something again means, again, you waste people's time for the first time they built it. And then all this effort spent on collecting information, reporting information, filling Excel sheets, drop lining a program, doing all that. I'm not talking about the understanding of what's happening, but just the collection of that and the formalizing of that process is something that in 2022 should no longer be relevant. Then we talk about the project. Small delays keep adding up. We sit down in a weekly trade meeting and something that we hoped would take 5 days is going to take 6 or 7. And it's no big deal that one time, but it adds up and projects start delaying. That is actually a good example because that's one where we know we're losing time. There are others where we don't know until way later. Talk about prioritization of work. So I heard such an example from one of our project managers from a project that he was on just a couple of years ago, where he said, we sit down in a weekly meeting, we discuss what needs to be done. We send dryliners to close up walls somewhere. And then retrospectively, we realized that after those walls were closed, nothing happened because the people doing tape and joint and mist coat were behind anyway. So it took them some time to get to those areas, while the first fix was delaying other work elsewhere. So if we were to just take that resource, those people, and tell them, go do that instead of this, the project as a whole would benefit even though they did work regardless. And of course, the more this happens, the more we stay on site. Staying on site for longer, from a waste perspective, affects everything. Then we talk about materials. So with materials, very easy stuff. We're talking about rework. And another example that I've seen recently, just the fact that we don't know when we need the materials. And then either we have them in too late, which is a problem for progress, or we have them in too early, and then it gets damaged. But all of this is a result of control or a lack thereof. Because if we were to know exactly that I will need these boards on Tuesday the 21st, then I would get these boards on Tuesday the 21st. And of course, one more is around money. So we're talking about contingencies. Contingency is a thing where it says, I am not in full control. I don't know what will happen. I have contingency. I'm not saying that the industry will ever eradicate contingency. No industry eradicates contingencies. But maybe we can get to a point where they're more managed and a bit more in control. And of course, we talked about all the other ways and what that does from a financial perspective. So the common thread of all of these, as I said here, is control. And now it's time to say that digital systems do not provide control. BuildOS does not provide control. BuildOS will not reduce waste. All it does is it gives information and provide tools and workflows to the professionals on site. And they can take control. So in essence, I think that one of the most important things about digital systems in general is adapting them to a situation where they fit what's happening in the industry. I'm a big believer in that in BuildOS, but in general, if you build a tool that means that, wow, a project could go so much better with that tool, but assuming the industry will be completely different, as in who's on site, who's not, just the relationship between different suppliers and everything, then great, you built a great theoretical thing and you can go publish study on that, but you're not going to have a real effect on real things in the real world. So what it can do is just the fact that it collects information means, as we said, managers don't need to. And when managers don't need to, they can do more managing. And when they do more managing, that they can control waste. Second, just provide clarity. Avoid that situation, because a system that looks at everything, in my story from before, would have been able to say, look, the correct thing to do now, or maybe not the correct, because it doesn't know everything. It doesn't know the status of materials on site. It doesn't know which professionals are here. It doesn't know enough about the weather even. But would be able to say, look, second fix is, I don't know, 10 days ahead of tape and joint, whereas first fix is 1 day ahead of first fix MEP. And then a manager can make a decision to, oh, wait, look at this. I should be sending them to first fix. Issues, of course, so catching things early, whether that is one subcontractor starting to delay or just something that is installed incorrectly, and stop that there. Make sure that the delay doesn't increase, doesn't then snowball effect to other trades, or that we minimize rework and don't let work pile up that will all have to be undone. And a final but very, very important thing is what I talked about in terms of processes around information. So streamlining processes. I'll give two examples. One is quality control. Can a system say if a wall is installed well or tape and jointed well? No. No, it's too fine a detail, it's too subjective. An expert needs to say that. But what it can do is come up and say, look, in 3 days, all the walls in that floor will be tape and jointed, roughly. So that is when you will be expected to QC those walls. Then say, oh, that has happened now. Pop up and here's a form that you can fill to say that you did your QC here and we're good to go. And then if that form is not filled, but the walls suddenly are painted because the system tracks progress, then come up and alert say, whoa, you said that you want to QC walls when they are tape and jointed, and you just missed that. Or maybe you just didn't fill in your form, and then you can do that. It's about controlling a process based on information, and material management is similar, just longer term, saying from current progress on site, we will get to installing doors in 3 weeks. Do you have the doors coming in? Or vice versa, the doors are delaying. I mean, we will get to a point where we delay in door installation. We're not going to be ready for that in time. Make sure that you control the delivery around that. Reducing waste by using technology to create a controlled process, not in its own. Okay, quick few examples, and then we can open the discussion. So, first of all, this is an example from a 50,000 square meter project in Europe, where they put what I think is exceptional effort into progress tracking. This means that every week they would dropline the schedule based on a complete understanding of how much work was done and how much does that connect to the resource. Basically, they had a key that said how many man hours does it take to install 1 meter of cable tray and one everything else, and used that to control progress in a holistic way. Spent a lot of time reporting, a lot of time discussing that, and redoing the schedule every 2 months. So pretty impressive procedures. And then what happened is that as build-ups was brought onto the project, we were brought on because there was a gap there they couldn't understand. They kept feeling that they were losing time and didn't understand where and why. And what we found is that while they thought they were somewhere in terms of their progress reporting, I think it was 68%, reality was 65, 3% gap in the project from where they thought they were. How is that gap created? So if you look at these two images here, these are images of ducts. The way this system works is you see a floor plan, you see ducts that are done in green and ducts that are not done in yellow. Both of these areas were marked in the program as complete for ductwork. Why? If you ask me, here it's very logical. There's just a bit missing there, a bit missing here, stuff like that. When a trade reports this, they report complete. When someone walks in and looks around, they say, yes, it's done here. And you move on. Here, there's a bit more in terms of gap, but still you could understand how that happened. Maybe some of the work couldn't progress. So in everyone's eyes, that is done, as done as it can be. Or maybe someone just missed it. But eventually, a lot of these small gaps, each gap would weigh in at the most 800 man hours to complete, added up to a total of 35,000 man hour gap. This gap, not knowing about it, and I will say here that I think keeping track of such level of detail and knowing this all the time is impossible manually. This gap is something that, from a waste perspective, is astronomical, is very dangerous. You get to a point where at the end of the project, you have to complete a lot of things. You come in to do following work and you realize that you can't. Suddenly, you bring back people to do work where they have already completed it in theory. But that's just a reality of manual tracking. Next is from a different world of quality. In this project, it's a lightweight steel frame, and the walls, the wall frames are prefabricated. A lot of these across the project, because we're talking about 8 buildings, and in total 812 such walls that are part of the steel frame, or such panels, let's call it, a part of the steel frame. And obviously, mistakes can be very costly because this is load bearing. So if you realize that you made a mistake here, you're in trouble. What happened there? Basically, when we joined the project, the system immediately found 2 walls that were flipped during the installation. So right to left instead of left to right, if you will. In one of the cases, this was in a building that had just started fitting out. So the only thing that really had to be undone is the dry lining on top of it. And this wall could easily be flipped back, everything fine. 10 days later, it's already fixed, work proceeds, minimum cost. On the other, we joined when this building was already quite advanced. So screed was in, and underfloor heating under that, some dry lining. Externally to this image, there is already block work in place even. And more importantly, because of screed and other things, this building is already loaded in a way, which means that you cannot take this panel out. That is what the engineer that came in said. So they had to build temporary support to the building just to take that out, flip it, and put it back in. And the cost of that in time and money is crazy. And this is rework in its worst. But there are other smaller things that happen just a lot more frequently. And finally, a third example is around just managing resources. So we talked about quality, we talked about understanding progress, and now let's talk about resources. In this example, it's a residential project here in the UK. The project team and the main contractor team basically felt that there's something going on with windows. Window installations are causing delays, but when you look at how many window fitters are on the project every day, it's more than enough, and they're qualified and they know what they're doing. So now everyone was a bit stuck. What came up is that they are doing enough work. You can see this graph here on the left that shows in gray, the gray line is the planned progress through time all across the project for windows. The green graph is the actual progress through time. So you can see that it's catching up and then exceeding the plan. The problem was the way in which they did that. So you're seeing this image here, in which we're seeing 27 apartments where at least one window was installed and at least one window was not. So that means that the dry liners can't come in and complete their work in that flat. That means return visits, that means delays, that means everything, not because of throughput, just because of management and the prioritization of the work. The result of this was that the main contractor and subcontractor here actually saw this and agreed that not only do they need to be changing up a bit how they work, but they can actually achieve more than their plan because of this, meaning move from 5 apartments per week, which was the original target, to 8. And again, a subcontractor in this case that knows that they have a lot of work available to them is happy to say, yeah, give me 8 a week, I'll do 8 because it's effective. Why not? I think one of the common threads on all of these examples, and with that I will finish, is that having the data, having the information, and having it accessible to everyone, which is very important. Basically, the main contractor and subcontractor and client all being able to see it in their own granularity, which is relevant to them. It still means that everyone is aligned. And when everyone is aligned, then we can work on processes together, then we can agree on ways forward together, and in general, reduce both friction on site, which is a real thing, and as a result of all this, a lot of waste in general, which is what this is all about. So thank you very much for that, and I guess we'll open it up now.
Yeah, thanks, Aviv. Really interesting, and I understand more now than I did previously, even though I thought I got it previously. And I've got lots of questions that have come out from watching that presentation. And in the audience, if you've got any questions for Aviv, please use the Q&A box. There is one question straight away, Aviv, from Phil Thompson, which is this: that assuming the system can link to materials, what unique ID does the platform use?
Definitely. So if I quickly go back to one of the images here, I'll take this one. So basically what is going on here, this white overlay, what it shows is it shows in this image, based on the model, I am expecting a piece of wall right there. The way this is done is that we take the model and the system analyzes the model based on rules given to it by people in our team, and then understands that, okay, here are elements that need to be built. So those elements are always connected back to the design and the elements in the model. So to technically answer the question, we were talking about the element ID of the software, so the Revit element ID or Navisworks element ID or whatever it is, but it's all basically tracking against the design.
Okay, I hope that answers your question, Phil. Question from Anstein. One of the biggest issues with third-party programs is interacting with a company's own systems and programs. And how does your product deal with this?
That's a great question. I think a few things that I said during this call. One was around the fact that build-outs is not the solution to everything. I don't think there is a solution to everything. I think it's about people and processes and different tools interacting. And the other is that you have to make it fit the workflows that already happen in the industry. For those two purposes, we are big believers in two things. Integrations. We integrate with everything that is needed. So we take data from and push data back to P6 and Power Project. We do this with software like BIM 360 Field and Procore and the like, Aconex, the such, et cetera, from a technical integration standpoint. The other is working with the companies. At the end of the day, we work with projects, but projects are part of companies and companies have their own workflows. So we have a tool called Power BI embedded into the platform. That's a tool that allows quick sort of dashboard visualization creation. And what we will do is per customer come in and say, okay, the way you guys report progress generally is this. One example that I've seen is activity counts. You look at for each activity, how many were meant to be complete, how many units, so those units can be apartments, were meant to be complete by today, how many are complete by today, and how many are available. That's sort of a table that you guys look at in terms of project control. Excellent. So we will mimic that in this Power BI. And finally, we are very open to giving our customers direct access to the data. That has, I will have to be honest, has yet to happen. But even the way our contracts are built are that the customer owns the data. So to give direct access to the data, to be able to push it wherever, or to visualize it, or to include it in some report is on the table.
Okay, thanks, Aviv. One question from me is around the BIM models, just to give you some background. I was the model manager on what I believe were the first 5D BIM models in the UK some years ago. And the way we had to structure the model in order to derive cost estimates and, more importantly, to drive project programming software meant that there was some complex modeling techniques that we had to, well, first of all, invent and then implement. In your world, is the modeling end of the project something that it is a benefit to you to be involved with, or do you just take what the client's got and adapt your processes?
It would probably be a benefit, but when we started, we realized that I have two options. I could say that for build-outs to work, I need for a model to check these boxes and a schedule to check these boxes. And then I'll have a great product that works fantastically, but no customers, because the models and schedules don't check those boxes. And what we've built, specifically in the modeling world, is something that internally we call model enrichment. It's basically our own representation of the model that then is enriched with further data. To give a clear example, we will track the studs of a wall, where that wall is modeled and not the studs, because we understand that that wall has stages in its life cycle, even though it's modeled as one wall. Or to give another example, let's say you don't have underfloor heating modeled at all, but I know to define the logic that says underfloor heating is required in the apartments in every room that is not the bathroom, let's say. So our representation of the model can receive that rule, then look for that on those floors without it being in the original model itself.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because when I was trying to guide models to drive programs, clearly you needed to separate out all the individual components that would be on site at different times. So the example you gave was a framed wall. you would need to put the framing in before you put the lining in, before you put the decorations on, which in modeling terms made it hugely complex. So I'm really interested to know that you can effectively apply some rules to those components and we can keep the model relatively simple. Excellent, thank you very much. And the other thing that occurred to me was about the gathering of data. So when you're doing that scanning and you're comparing it, I guess, to some BIM models somewhere, where is all that data, first of all, stored, and where is it compared and analyzed? Is that through your own servers or some Amazon web server, or how does that process work?
Yeah, so just to complete the picture, if somebody walks around with a camera, obviously cameras don't have access to internet on site. So that's just a capturing exercise. Then they will connect that camera to a computer that will upload those videos to our Amazon web servers, indeed, where they go through the whole analysis process, where the data is then stored to feed the dashboard system. As I mentioned, the data belongs to the customer. So at the end of a project, we have a process of exporting it from our servers to someone else's servers or to files or to something.
I see, thank you. And an anonymous attendee has said, can we use this tool for large earthworks or civil engineering types of projects?
That is a good question. I forgot to mention this, but when we started, we thought to ourselves, what we're trying to tackle is, again, this control and management idea. And for us, where that seemed to be the most complex is within buildings. Because even when you look at a building project, you start from earthworks, superstructure, stuff like that, which is generally not simple engineering-wise, but simple to know what's going on. You just need to take a look, more or less. And then suddenly you have a building where you need to be building, I don't know, 500, 1,000, 2,000 rooms. And in each room, all sorts of things need to happen. And suddenly to understand what's going on is far, far more complex. So today, BuildOps specifically is focused only on building sites. But again, I think it's about combining the right technology for everything. Just to give an example, I know a piece of technology not from BuildOps that tracks the usability and utility of a tower crane. I think these are two things that interact well together. And as a company, if you talk about your civils projects and your building projects, again, there are solutions for that by other companies, and it's all about just building the right tool set.
Okay, thank you, Aviv. As we move toward the last few minutes of this session, I'd like, if I may, just to share screen again. Aviv, can you just wave at me if you're seeing my deck now? That's great, thank you. What I wanted to talk about was something I mentioned earlier, was around the digital leadership course, which we have developed above and beyond what we normally deliver in terms of learning opportunities. This is not for everyone. This is for the people in your business that are tasked with driving digital innovation, whether that's the managing director, whether that's a department head or a divisional head, or just in charge of a small team. But what we're trying to do, excuse me while I just get to PowerPoint so I can advance that, is run a course, mostly virtual, over several weeks of duration. It comprises an introductory digital leadership module with me, in which you'll undertake some tasks. Over the third and fourth week, you'll be set some more learning. Some of it is common to all the students. Some of it is individual to you. That will culminate in you doing some pre-reading of some real-world case studies on the Tideway project, when you will then attend another virtual workshop. This is a Harvard Business School type workshop where it works with those case studies and helps you understand some of the leadership challenges. And after a couple of further assessments, we can award you a Digital Leaders Badge. We've just started the 6th cohort. We generally have around about 15 persons per cohort, preferably from the same organization. But if you've got smaller groups, we can mix you together. It's been getting some pretty good feedback, I'm delighted to say. And talking of feedback, My colleague Toby, who is actually working under the pseudonym Becky Bryant, you can see on the screen there, will at the end of this session make sure that you get a feedback form to fill in. Hopefully, Toby, if you can drop that link into the chat as well, in case people miss it. So we would really appreciate your feedback about this particular event. It's really important that we respond back to our partners who fund the school that what we're delivering are the right topics to the right quality and to their satisfaction. So it only remains to me to thank Aviv from BuildOps very sincerely. It's been a really interesting presentation, great example of the change in the construction industry in this century, which has been a long time coming. But I think it's a great example of digital innovation, providing real world solutions to real world problems. And what I really liked about the tools that you showed us, Aviv, was it allays some of my fears about the huge, massive increases in the amount of data that we have, but we don't necessarily have the tools and the resources to understand that data, to analyze it, and to use it for real world purposes. So I'm absolutely delighted with what you've presented today. So thanks once again to Aviv. Thank you to everyone in the audience. Thank you to those who asked questions. This session has been recorded and it will be uploaded to the Supply Chain School's digital resources. So thank you for attending, and this event is now closed. Thank you.